Washington, D.C., January 20th, 1953. Snow blankets the city, muffling the sounds of a nation on the cusp of change. At the White House, an awkward and chilly scene unfolds, mirroring the winter air. President-elect Dwight D. Eisenhower, the celebrated war hero, waits in his car. He refuses to step inside to greet the outgoing president, Harry S. Truman. This cold shoulder, a stark break from tradition, isn't just a political slight. It's the public culmination of a friendship that has fractured under the immense pressures of power, politics, and personal pride. A decade of bitter silence would follow this day. How did two men who once held each other in the highest esteem become such strangers, even rivals? Their story is a powerful lesson in leadership, loyalty, and the human cost of the political arena. To understand their falling out, we must go back to a time of unity, to the crucible of World War II. In the war rooms and on the battlefields of Europe, a bond was forged. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander, was the man tasked with liberating a continent, and in Washington, a determined senator from Missouri, Harry Truman, led a committee investigating war, earning a reputation for his integrity and grit. When Franklin Roosevelt died suddenly in 1945, this unassuming man was thrust into the presidency, inheriting a world in turmoil. He leaned heavily on his military leaders, none more so than Eisenhower. Photographs from this era tell a story of mutual respect. We see them together in the Oval Office, sharing smiles and firm handshakes. Truman saw in Eisenhower a brilliant strategist and a leader of immense character. He trusted him completely, not just with military command but with the future of post-war Europe. In fact, Truman's admiration ran so deep that in 1947, he made a truly astonishing offer. He privately told Eisenhower that if the general would run for president on the Democratic ticket, Truman himself would gladly step aside and serve as his vice president. He believed Eisenhower was the best man for the job, regardless of party. Eisenhower, ever cautious of mixing military service with politics, politely declined, but the gesture spoke volumes about the depth of Truman's respect. It seemed their bond was unbreakable. But the political landscape was about to shift dramatically. As the 1952 presidential election approached, the political climate in America had grown toxic. The Cold War was escalating. The Korean War was a bloody stalemate. And a wave of anti-communist hysteria fanned by Senator Joseph McCarthy was sweeping the nation. The Democratic Party, after 20 years in power, was vulnerable. The Republicans saw their chance, and their perfect candidate was Dwight D. Eisenhower. The man who had once been courted by Democrats was now persuaded to run as a Republican, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation. The campaign that followed was brutal. Eisenhower's strategists targeted Truman's administration, attacking its handling of the Korean War and alleging corruption. But the most painful blow for Truman was the attack on one of his closest friends and mentors, General George C. Marshall. Marshall, the architect of the post-war Marshall Plan, and a figure of immense global prestige, was accused by McCarthy and other hardline Republicans of being soft on communism, even of treason. It was a baseless, vicious smear against a man Eisenhower deeply respected. Truman expected Eisenhower, Marshall's own protege, to defend him publicly, to rise above the political mudslinging and protect the honor of their shared mentor. But Eisenhower remained silent. Pressured by the McCarthy wing of his party, he made a calculated political decision. During a campaign stop in Wisconsin, McCarthy's home state, Eisenhower deleted a paragraph from his speech that praised General Marshall. For Truman, this was an unforgivable act of betrayal. He saw it not as a political calculation, but as a profound failure of character. The man he once offered the presidency to had, in his eyes, sold out a friend for political gain. The personal admiration was gone, replaced by a deep, bitter disappointment. The friendship was shattered. The silence that began on that cold Inauguration Day in 1953 lasted for nearly a decade. Two of the most powerful men of the 20th century lived and worked in the same city, yet they never spoke. Their paths, once so intertwined, now ran parallel, separated by a chasm of hurt, pride, and political division. Truman retired to his home in Independence, Missouri, becoming a private citizen. While Eisenhower navigated the presidency through the height of the Cold War, they exchanged no letters, no phone calls. The warmth of their wartime camaraderie was a frozen memory. History, it seemed, had driven a permanent wedge between them. But history also has a way of bringing things full circle. In October of 1959, the nation mourned the passing of General George C. Marshall. At his funeral, amidst the somber gathering of world leaders and military brass, two familiar figures stood near each other. For the first time in years, Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower were in the same room. The occasion was solemn, a tribute to the man whose legacy had been at the heart of their rift. There, in the shared grief for their mentor, a small crack appeared in the wall of silence. A quiet nod, a brief, formal handshake. It was not a full reconciliation, but it was a start. The ice was beginning to thaw. The final act of their complex relationship came 4 years later, in the wake of another national tragedy. November 1963. The world was stunned by the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The two former presidents, now elder statesmen, traveled to Washington for the state funeral. On the eve of the service, they met at Blair House, the president's guest residence. This time, the meeting was different. The political battles were long over. They were simply two old men, sharing a moment of national sorrow. They talked for over an hour, not as political rivals, but as two individuals who had both carried the immense burden of the presidency. They spoke of the past, of the weight of their decisions, and of the country they both loved. The bitterness had finally faded, replaced by a quiet, mutual understanding. The handshake they shared that day was no longer cold and formal, but warm and genuine. The story of Truman and Eisenhower is more than just a political feud. It's a profoundly human story about how friendship, loyalty, and principle can be tested in the unforgiving crucible of power. It shows that even the greatest of leaders are susceptible to pride and personal grievance, but it also offers a powerful lesson in reconciliation. It reminds us that even after years of silence and bitterness, common ground can be found, and respect can be restored. Their journey from allies to adversaries, and finally to a quiet peace, serves as a timeless reflection on the complex intersection of the personal and the political. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into history.